For countless centuries, people have been making music as a way to express themselves. With countless different genres and subgenres, there's truly something out there for everyone. Some songs are happy and upbeat, though others harbor a much darker story. Number 5. Vegas-based band The Killers made headlines when they released Jenny Was a Friend of Mine in 2004, in what they called their murder trilogy. The song makes reference to the 1986 murder of 18-year-old Jennifer Lavin, who was taken out by her boyfriend Robert Chambers. On August 24, 1986, Jennifer and Robert spent the day drinking together at Dorian's Red Hand, despite the fact that they were only 18 and underage. Only 2 people truly know what happened that day, and sadly one of them is no longer around to give their side of the story. Robert claims that Jennifer's death was an accident and it happened during an encounter in New York's Central Park. Jennifer was found near 5th Avenue and 83rd Street with her clothes removed and obvious defensive wounds and injuries to her body. Police arrived at the scene after Jennifer was found by a passing cyclist, and her boyfriend, Robert Chambers, became their key suspect as he was the last person to have seen her that day. The coroner concluded that Jennifer's cause of death was strangulation and that she'd also suffered other injuries during the attack. Robert changed his story multiple times, and police noticed that he had scratch marks on his face and arms, which Robert protested were caused by his cat and not from Jennifer attempting to fight him off, as was suspected. Robert was charged with second-degree murder. However, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict after 9 days of deliberation in the courtroom. His defense made claims that Jennifer was promiscuous and that it had been her own fault. After being unable to reach a verdict, Robert was forced to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Killer's songwriter, Brandon Flowers, told the BBC that he was inspired to write a song about the crime after hearing Suffer Little Children by the Smiths. Flowers included the lyrics, "We took a walk that night, but it wasn't the same. We had a fight on the promenade out in the rain. She said she loved me but had somewhere to go. She couldn't scream while I held her close. I swore I'd never let go." Number 4. David Berkowitz, who is also known as the Son of Sam, prowled the streets of New York between 1976 and 1977. In total, Berkowitz claimed the lives of 6 people and injured many more, and sent New York City into a complete frenzy trying to catch the killer, who was known as the Son of Sam. Berkowitz had a very troubled childhood after being adopted when he was just days old. He never felt like he truly belonged to anywhere and always struggled to fit in with other kids at school. As a result, Berkowitz became more and more withdrawn, with colleagues later describing him as a loner. The passing of his adopted mother, Pearl Berkowitz, had a large impact on him, and after this, he became more and more withdrawn. By the age of 18, Berkowitz had enrolled in the US Army and was sent to South Korea. By the time he returned from the Army, Berkowitz was a changed man, and something inside of him was much different after 2 years of active duty, and Berkowitz snapped. He targeted young people who were sat in their cars, and many of these were couples, though some were just young teenagers who were hanging out with friends. Amazingly, it was a parking ticket that led to the capture of the infamous Son of Sam. A witness from the final crime scene noticed that the Son of Sam drove away in a car that had a parking ticket attached to it. Authorities were able to track down records of all tickets given out that day, of which there were only a handful. Police were able to track down David Berkowitz and arrested him for murder, to which he simply replied, "Well, you've got me." The Son of Sam case was about to take an even stranger turn when Berkowitz admitted, during questioning, that his neighbor's dog had commanded him to commit the murders. Despite this bizarre reasoning, Berkowitz was found competent to stand trial and was sentenced to life in prison. New York-based punk band Dead Boys quickly latched on to Berkowitz's explanation and portrayed this in their 1978 song called Son of Sam. Lyrics from the song include, "Last night in the middle of a dream, fiery red dog eyes double-beamed, telling me directions of my soul, poured my life inside a bullet hole. I am the Son of Sam." Berkowitz later admitted that his defense was fabricated in an attempt to be found mentally incompetent to stand trial. Berkowitz is now an evangelical Christian and writes about how God saved him in his darkest hour. He's also written books and has a website which features a written apology to the victims and their families. Number 3. Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, is one of Washington State's most prolific serial killers. Between 1982 and 1998, Ridgway murdered at least 49 women, although it's believed his victim count could be as high as 71. Ridgway would approach the women and asked if they needed a ride or would just engage in general conversation. Once he'd gained their trust, Ridgway would attack them from behind. He would then leave their bodies in the Green River, leading to his nickname, the Green River Killer. In 1978, DNA profiling was in its infancy, and Seattle police were desperate to solve the Green River killings. While these samples were being analyzed, police were catching on to Ridgway and began mounting as much evidence as possible against him. When the results came in, they knew he was their man, and an arrest was made. Ridgway entered a plea bargain, set out by his defense team. He pled guilty to the murders of 48 women and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Ridgway was also allowed to take the plea deal as he assisted investigators in the recovery of his victims' remains. To this day, 2 of Ridgway's known victims are still unidentified and are known as Jane Doe B-17 and Jane Doe B-20. Investigators are asking for any assistance in the identification of these 2 women. In 2001, Neko Case decided to write a haunting song about Ridgway's crimes. Case was growing up in Tacoma, Washington during the time that Ridgway was active, and explains how she was inspired to write the song that remembered his victims as opposed to drawing more attention to the unidentified killer. The lyrics for verse 2 are as follows: "But daylight won't remember that, when speckled fawns graze round your bones. Who took the time to fold your clothes and shook the valley of the shadow?" Number 2. The new Netflix documentary about Richard Ramirez has once again propelled him and his crimes into the spotlight. Ramirez is undoubtedly one of California's most terrifying serial killers and sent residents and police into a frenzy during 1984 and 1985. Ramirez would slip into homes that had unlocked doors or windows before attacking sleeping residents under the cover of the night. His MO of breaking into homes at night led to him being known as the Night Stalker, and soon all of California was on the lookout for him. The publicity surrounding Ramirez only grew when he was arrested, and it was revealed that he was a Satanist and left behind symbols at the crime scenes to let police know that they were dealing with the Night Stalker. After leaving behind an AC/DC hat at one of the crime scenes, the band were soon roped into the Night Stalker case, with the media calling them satanic and blaming their evil music for the crimes. Ramirez admitted that AC/DC had become important to him from an early age after being introduced to the Australian band by his childhood friend. The press ran with the wild claims that Ramirez was inspired by the band's song Night Prowler, and that they were responsible. One headline read, "AC/DC music made me kill at 16, Night Stalker admits." Ramirez himself admitted that Night Prowler was his favorite AC/DC song. When he was arrested, officers told the court that Ramirez was humming Night Prowler while answering their questions. AC/DC quickly released a statement absolving them of any involvement in the Night Stalker case and admitted that it was Ramirez who chose to use their songs to further his agenda. Sadly, AC/DC faced public backlash and the media attempted to hold them accountable, though courts made it very clear that AC/DC had no direct involvement with the Night Stalker case and that it was simply the doing of Ramirez. Even now, the song Night Prowler is still linked to Ramirez and still strikes fear in those who experience the terror of the Night Stalker. In crimes like these, metal bands and Satanism are often blamed, but in reality, Ramirez had much larger issues and stressors behind his crimes. Number 1. Judas Priest are no strangers to controversy. After all, being in a metal band in the early 1980s was a surefire way for the media to brand you as evil. So when Judas Priest released their song titled The Ripper, the media went into a frenzy and the song was met with much controversy. Jack the Ripper is a mysterious, unidentified serial killer who was active in London's Whitechapel district between 1888 and 1889. The Ripper has become one of the world's most infamous serial killers, and even though we don't know his identity, his name alone is enough to strike fear into people's hearts. Over the years, armchair detectives and investigators have attempted to uncover the identity of the Ripper. Hundreds upon thousands of books, podcasts, films, and documentaries exist about the elusive killer, but we aren't really any closer to figuring out the mystery. As this case is now over 100 years old, it's possible that we may never find out the truth. Any evidence that may have existed is now long gone, and police did not have the consideration for the crime scene investigation and forensic science like they do today. At most of the crime scenes, the blood was washed away within hours, and residents worked quickly to clean up the area. After all, life in Whitechapel still had to continue, and people didn't want to be reminded of what was happening on the streets after dark. Jack the Ripper has cemented himself in pop culture as the most mysterious and infamous serial killer of all time, inspiring numerous metal bands and musicians to write songs about his crimes. The Ripper by Judas Priest was written from the Ripper's perspective as he goes about killing women and taunting the police of Whitechapel. The song opens with the lyrics, "You're in for a surprise, you're in for a shock. In London town streets where there's darkness and fog. When you least expect me and you turn your back, I'll attack. All hear my warning, never turn your back on the Ripper." Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.